sits at 168th Street and Fort Washington. And currently, there are multiple occupants in the building. We had multiple meetings about this matter. This has been raised by many community members over years. Most specifically is the gentleman that we have right in front of you, Dr. Gary Altheim, who is the Executive Director of Growth and Development Services since before I became a board member, has been coming to the community board to say to voice his concerns about the way that the building is being managed and operated. There was a resolution that was entered in 2014 that I authored along with Richard Lewis that spoke to said governance and basically said, what is going on? How is the building governed? Who is in charge of the building? And, basically who are the occupants, etc. The mayor's office was in the room during that time. Alize Beal, who was the liaison for CB12 at the time, was here in committee, spoke to the fact that the building is, in the mayor's office's perspective, underutilized based on her own investigation going to the Armory and seeing how the spaces were managed, specifically during the non-track season. The track season is about 4 to 5 months long, but that leaves 7 extra months that is non-track. And what happens in that building, sometimes it's almost like radio silence. I personally had experienced that, which is one of the reasons why I started an inquiry into it, specifically during my time in the SUNY Attain Lab that I was attending very regularly. Eventually I did get to meet Dr. Gary because of the questions that I was asking and learning more about what it was, and then delving into not just the public conversation, but into the details, the documents, and the history of the matter. And so now that brings us to today. We've had a meeting in December. After in October, multiple community members appeared asking for the matter to be reviewed. The chair at the time, Shahabuddin Ali, spoke to the matter and said that it was going to be referred to committee. We picked it up in December. In January, the Armory Foundation appeared and spoke to the matter, gave a presentation about the work that they do, and the structure of the operations that they run. One of the things that they said at that meeting was that they do not license anyone in the building, and that DHS is mostly the licensor for the occupants in the building. We had already been inviting, I have to give the review, I know what the rule is, but I don't know how you boil it down so the license, where was I going with this?
January DHS.
We invited DHS to come and speak to the matter. They did not appear. However, New York One had picked up the story and ran a story about it. Within days of that story, and people have corrected me multiple times saying, oh, we don't think government moves that fast. We don't think that just because New York One ran a story that this was the result of it. I'm just giving the timeline. New York One's ran a story, Growth and Development Services, and Gary Altheim received an eviction letter from Department of Homeless Services, evicting him from his space, which he had been in for 16 years, but had been doing the work that he's been doing for 22 years. Because of that, the committee, in discussing it, felt the need to put forth a resolution asking for a stay of eviction, specifically because we are also a city agency. And it's the consensus of the committee was, we have picked up this matter, we're reviewing it, and another city agency, the city agency which actually has governance, steps in, and their first action is to evict pretty much the entity and the person that has been advocating for the concerns there, and that at the very least they should be waiting for what comes out of this committee, so that we can be advocating for what's best for the community and any actions where that's concerned. And so that passed pretty much unanimously. The only exceptions were people who needed to recuse themselves because there are board members who work for and who are on the board of the Armory that are a part of this board. One other person recused himself, I believe, because of the work that he does with the city. And that DHS did not appear at that meeting either. Natalie Espino was here representing Gail Brewer's office, and basically her word to us was that due to the fact that DHS did not appear, even though she encouraged them to appear, that we should act in kind. That's how the resolution came about. So fast forward to now, and this is to bring the committee up to speed. Since then, there was an extension that was given to Growth and Development Services to March 31st. So really, since then actually DHS did ultimately appear. In that meeting, their statement was that they only license Growth and Development Services and PAL and the Armory Foundation in the building. Now, 1199, the Attain Lab, Columbia Teachers and Learnings, and there are other, New Balance has a sneaker store in the building. There's a Victory Cafe, and a space that the caterer holds, which I'm not really familiar. By the way, to the committee, we sent out an email as well as to the public. We sent out an email saying we would like to have an opportunity to tour the spaces. There was a tour that was given in 2014, but it only, the Armory Foundation ran that tour, and we only went to the we went to the track, of course, and then we went to the SUNY Attain Lab, and we went to the theater, as well as there's a space that they run the SAT program. They did not bring us to Growth and Development Services, which was in the building at the time, and they did not bring us to the other spaces that exist in the building. So I sent an email out that says, for proper context, it would be appropriate that we have a tour given, not by the Armory Foundation, but by the very entity of the city that is supposed to be the licensor for that building, of the entire building, not just the spaces that is decided that we should see, so that way we can weigh in about what's appropriate for our community. A request was made by DHS that we submit to them all questions that have risen out of committee. That resulted in 23 questions being sent to them. To date, we have no answer. At 5:21 p.m. today, after I think maybe about 2 o'clock, I sent an email that said, we have submitted these questions to you over time. We've yet to hear anything. In addition, Phil Zablocki of Advocates for Equality and Integrity, got it this time, has been foiling. Many years ago, one of the things that I noticed is in Dr. Altham's long period of advocacy, there were questions as to whether anything that he was saying was actually valid, and I said, well, foil it, because what's valid is what's actually on the record. Those cannot be contested, and then, maybe that can speak to the truth or not. And so Phil Zablocki and many other people have been involved in trying to elucidate what's happening in that building. As a result, can you speak to how many foils you've done on the matter?
Good evening, everybody. I would say at this time over the last 4 to 5 years, it's got to be at least 2 to 3 dozen. I honestly lost track. I have a spreadsheet that has all that.
Yes.
From doing a foil for the license for the Armory Foundation, which is dated 2002, up until the latest and greatest, which is seeking any licenses for the other occupants in the building. And for the record, DHS has extended that now, I believe it's 3 months. They're still looking through their records, and I'm supposed to have another answer back tomorrow. So we'll see if they can find anything, if they have any licenses for the other occupants of the Armory. or if they're just gonna come back and say they could not find anything.
So I want for the record for the public to be aware of what the questions are. And I'll try to go quickly. What city, state, or otherwise agency audits each occupant's activities within the Fort Washington Armory, and what are the audit methods that assist these agency or agencies ensuring the desired goals, results, or benefits are met? Please inform on how CB12 can find data for costs paid for utilities at the Fort Washington Armory monthly, annually. That's based on DHS stating here that the city actually pays the utilities for the building. Was DHS aware that Jack Pfeiffer occupied space in a makeshift apartment at the Fort Washington Armory in a space that is now being utilized by 1199? So I also want, there's a picture here, the committee can actually pass these amongst each other. So I had someone, I actually saw this queen size bed personally. It is in a space that is down this hallway in a room within the Armory. And I had a review done to find the oldest picture of that bed. And we were able to find one dated back to November 7th, 2012. So I did a modest estimate just based off of the newest hours that I was able to find said something like 6:30 till 10 p.m. depending on the activity happening at the Armory. And that's pretty much during the track season. So I just set a modest estimate of, let's say, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Let's eliminate 2 weeks out of the year for holidays. We're looking at, since 2012, a modest estimate of 36,000 hours that space could be being used by a CBO in this district to push out outcomes for anyone, for our children, for our seniors, for any purpose. And instead, we had a queen size bed. And so one of the questions is related to that. Was DHS aware that Jack Pfeiffer occupied that space in that makeshift apartment? Pretty much, the understanding is that he would fly in. There's also a website called Master Track. I was gonna try to pull it up. Did you wanna have a?
Just quickly,
Yeah.
What is the goal for today about talking about the Fort Washington Armory? Because it seems like there's been no movement.
Yeah. So there really has been no movement, but the reason why, just to give you my justification of why I'm reading this, is because we are supposed to operate in public. These emails happen in my email box. And so I have to submit to the record for the committee and the community to be aware what this looks like and where we stand today.
But
so
you can
I'm
summarize
pretty
it.
much.
You don't have to read them all, you can summarize it.
So I was just gonna read the new questions. The old questions are already on the record from last month and they're in the minutes. So some of the people here are not taking a copy home with them. And so just for the awareness of our community, which we serve, I'm reading the questions. So, and clarifying, or you know what, I'll read the questions, and if anyone has questions, they can ask questions. I've been informed that there are outstanding FOIL requests, which is why I asked Phil to speak to those. Today I also asked where the answers to these 23 questions are. I have not received not even one answer, and the FOILs are also outstanding, and what has been happening is they schedule the answer for the FOILs to the day after the housing committee, and then when Phil goes back and says, okay, you said it would be available this day, it's rescheduled to the day after the next housing meeting. And I think that's happened 3 times so far.
2 times
So
it's been rescheduled, and it's scheduled again for tomorrow.
right, it's scheduled, that's what I'm saying, 3 times. That's the
No,
third.
It's been rescheduled twice, because it was originally.
So it's been
scheduled-
rescheduled twice,
Yeah.
but 3 times it's been scheduled the day after the housing meeting.
Correct.
So, that being said, I included in my email that I learned about these FOIL requests and that we'd be interested to funnel that into our review. That it's hard to, we have our perspective on what's happening, but the answers to these questions and potentially whatever comes from this FOIL are all things that should be a part of this process. So, and I believe me when I tell you, I would like to be finalizing this issue today, but it would not be proper until they answer these questions. Yeah.
So, as someone who works in government, if someone sent me 23 questions that they wanted answers to for the next month, there's no way in hell I would be able to.
But you could
provide
answer
details.
one.
I could answer one.
Or two.
But I think compared to like the conversation we were having with this resolution, we really need to boil down the top 4 things we need to know from DHS that are the absolute priority in order to move this forward. Because the strategy we have been using so far is not working.
So,
I mean, I personally, I would just disagree with that. Quite frankly, if you have a month, that's a month's time to answer 23 questions.
not to mention that there are questions that were asked of them when they were sitting here, and they've
No,
just
yeah,
only been
no,
put in
yeah.
I'm
writing.
sorry,
Yeah.
if I might just finish. And also, the point being is that we've already raised this.
Mhm.
If there are political reasons for why that person's not going to respond to those 23 questions in a very, I think, understandable time frame, such as a month, then it doesn't necessarily leave us with an opportunity to really ask if there's already hands on the other side keeping that from being answered. So, if anything, what I would then say is if we want to move forward, why don't we create a resolution today, essentially asking that they comply already with the FOIL request that has been going forward for what's now 20, how many years?
As far as the FOIL requests?
Yes.
The FOIL requests are just over 5, well, some of those have been answered, and they're actually a part of how we've been able to review this in committee, is the results of those FOILs. But there are new FOILs that have not been, and then now the questions that actually came from this committee are not being answered. And I agree that a month is sufficient time, so at least begin, and they were sitting here when they were asked, and they understand what the boil down is of what it is that we're looking for. The last email that I got at 5:21 was that they're working on it and that they're gonna circle back. And so I responded, what's the timeline for you circling back? So that is where we are.
So I agree with Ariel. I think we should put it in the form of a resolution and make it a real short resolution. Whereas this has been dragging through this committee and there's been a lack of response from the Department of Homeless Services, we therefore demand that all issues that have been raised since October to today, which is certainly not a month, it's 5 or 6 months at this point, be responded to within the next month period. And I would just move forward.
In a robust fashion.
Yeah.
In a robust fashion.
Yeah,
That's
perfect.
it, that's it.
What I will do
That's
is,
it.
this list of 23 questions will be published in the minutes, for the record.
Yes, and then just attach the questions, and then we can just say, and then you can have even just a little star, and then say referring to those questions, the, FOIA requests, basically that. And then also, the one thing that piques my interest is the, clause that we looked at together, that when there's a clause in the contract with the Department of Homeless Services and the Armory Foundation. That clause states that when the Armory Foundation is not using their space for their events, like track and field or awards ceremonies and such, when they are not using their space, they receive the space rent-free. In exchange, they are to make that space available free of charge for activities to be governed by the Parks Department. Now, that doesn't mean it has to be a Parks Department activity, but that Parks would have, let's say, Friends of Inwood
Administrative
Hill Park, or
oversight.
administrated, or Isabella to have their walking program, or something like that. So therefore, and I would have just put that in the, please clarify in the resolution, please clarify your intent to implement this part of your contract with the Armory Foundation.
So while we're on that point, just
Yes.
For the record, number 10 is seemingly representatives of the Parks Department were unaware of clauses in the Armory Foundation license which provides for parks to use the premises for the benefit of the community when Armory Foundation is not using the premises. Article 4 of the Armory Foundation license sets this practice along with the upkeep of the building and other administrative functions as a requirement which allows for the waiver of this actually sets the waiver of the Armory Foundation's compensation, no, the
Rent.
city's compensation of rent from the Armory
Right.
Foundation, in exchange for this allowance,
Right.
from the way that it reads. And so that's the question that was
The other
asked.
question I have, which I think is the elephant in the room, was GDS evicted?
GDS was, that was the next step that I was going to. GDS on paper has been evicted, but my understanding, the last thing that I heard is that GDS is still in the space. Is that correct? Can you speak to that, Dr. Altan?